The salty breeze tangled in her hair as Claire Reynolds stepped out of her car, taking in the breathtaking view of the secluded coastal town of Blue Haven. It was a place untouched by the chaos of the city, a haven of sun-drenched cliffs, quiet beaches, and a promise of tranquility. She had come here to escape. After years of climbing the corporate ladder, she finally allowed herself a break, a 2-week retreat with no deadlines, no meetings, just the ocean and her thoughts. But the last thing she expected was to be swept into the current of something far more intoxicating. It all started with a flat tire. "Need a hand?" A deep voice drawled from behind her. Claire turned, her gaze landing on a man leaning casually against a beat-up pickup truck. He was the embodiment of rugged charm, sun-kissed skin, strong arms, and an easy smirk that hinted at trouble. "I'm not great with cars," she admitted, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Lucky for you, I am." He extended a calloused hand. Noah Carter. Local handyman, part-time fisherman, and full-time beach bum. She laughed. Claire. Vacationer, terrible with cars, and in desperate need of relaxation. What started as a simple act of kindness led to late-night walks along the shore, stolen kisses under the moonlight, and whispered secrets between the crashing waves. Their chemistry was undeniable, wild, electric, impossible to ignore. But summer had an expiration date. As the days slipped through her fingers like sand, Claire found herself dreading the moment she would have to say goodbye. Blue Haven was supposed to be a temporary escape, but Noah had become something far more permanent in her heart. Could a fleeting summer romance withstand the real world? Or was she destined to leave behind more than just footprints in the sand? The days passed in a golden haze, each moment stretching into something timeless. Claire had come to Blue Haven expecting solitude, the kind that let her breathe without the weight of expectations pressing down on her chest. Instead, she found herself caught in the easy rhythm of coastal life, mornings spent sipping coffee on the cottage's porch, afternoons exploring hidden coves with Noah, and nights where the line between vacation and something far more real blurred. She had never been the kind of woman to fall easily. Love, for her, had always been something logical, calculated, built on shared goals and sensible choices. But there was nothing sensible about Noah Carter. And yet, when she was with him, everything made sense. Noah knew every inch of Blue Haven like the back of his hand. The small town, nestled between towering cliffs and endless waves, wasn't just a home to him. It was a part of his soul. "You've got sand in your hair," he teased one evening as they sat on the edge of the pier, their feet dangling above the water. Claire wrinkled her nose. "Considering you've dragged me through every beach, rock pool, and fishing dock in this town, I'm not surprised." Noah smirked. "Dragged you? Pretty sure you're the one who begged me to show you the hidden cove yesterday." She rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. It had been magical. Wading through the waist-deep water, squeezing between two massive cliffs, and emerging into a secluded spot where the ocean met a tiny waterfall. It felt like a secret world only they knew about. "You love it here," she observed softly. Noah leaned back on his palms, tilting his face toward the sky as the first stars began to flicker to life. "Yeah. Never felt the need to leave. My dad was a fisherman. My mom ran the little bookstore on Main Street. Blue Haven's in my blood." Claire hesitated. "Have you ever thought about leaving?" Noah turned his head to look at her, the warmth in his gaze making her heart stutter. "Not really. I like my life simple. Fixing boats, helping out at the docks, fishing in the mornings. I don't need more than this." Simple. It was such a foreign concept to Claire, whose life had been built around ambition. She had spent years pushing for the next big promotion, the next big opportunity. She had always believed success meant moving forward, never staying in one place for too long. But sitting there with Noah, listening to the gentle lapping of the waves, she wondered if maybe she had been running towards something that didn't actually make her happy. Their relationship wasn't meant to be serious. They never talked about the future, never made promises. It was just a summer romance, hot, fleeting, and bound to end. But Claire couldn't deny that Noah made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. He made her laugh without thinking, He made her feel grounded when the world had always seemed like a treadmill she had to keep running on. And then there were the nights. Nights when the heat between them burned too hot to ignore. When his lips found hers under the moonlight, when his hands traced over her sun-kissed skin, when she forgot about the world beyond this town. It wasn't just passion. It was something deeper, something terrifyingly real. One evening, as they lay tangled in his bed, the scent of salt water and his cologne clinging to the sheets, Claire murmured, "This was supposed to be simple." Noah's fingers traced lazy circles along her bare shoulder. "You say that like it has to be complicated." She swallowed. "Doesn't it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned on his side, brushing a strand of hair from her face. What if it doesn't? She didn't know how to respond to that. But summer had a way of running out faster than she wanted it to. One morning, as she checked her phone, she saw the reminder she had been avoiding. Flight back to New York, 3 days. Reality came crashing in like a wave, pulling her under. She tried to ignore it, to push it to the back of her mind, but every moment with Noah felt heavier now. Every laugh, every touch, it all felt like a countdown to something she wasn't ready to face. One evening, as they walked along the shore, Noah glanced at her with a knowing look. "You're leaving soon?" It wasn't a question. Claire exhaled sharply. "Yeah." He nodded, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, something like hesitation. "What happens then?" She hated that she didn't have an answer. "I don't know." They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the waves rolling onto the sand. Then Noah stopped, catching her wrist gently. "Claire." His voice was steady, but his grip on her hand was firm. "Is this just a summer thing for you?" She opened her mouth to say yes. It was supposed to be. But the truth sat heavy in her chest. "I don't know," she admitted. Noah studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Okay." But something about the way he said it made her chest ache. That night, she lay awake in her cottage, staring at the ceiling. She had a life waiting for her back in New York. A job. Friends. A future she had worked for. But when she pictured leaving, she felt hollow. Could she really walk away from this? From him? Claire had spent her whole life chasing after what she thought she wanted. But what if what she truly wanted was here all along? 3 days left. 3 days to decide if she was brave enough to take a chance on something real. The air felt heavier the closer Claire got to her last day in Blue Haven. She went through the motions, walking through town, stopping by the small cafe she'd come to love, even watching the ocean stretch endlessly before her, but everything felt muted, like she was already halfway gone. She still hadn't told Noah what she planned to do. Mostly because she didn't know herself. She thought leaving would be simple, that it was just a summer romance, a perfect memory she could take with her. But every time she looked at Noah, every time he touched her, it felt less like a fling and more like something breaking open inside her. A dangerous feeling, because if she let herself believe in it, she wasn't sure she could walk away. Noah's side of the story. Noah had never been the type to chase things that weren't meant to stay. Blue Haven had its fair share of visitors, tourists who came looking for a piece of paradise, only to leave once they'd had their fill. He'd had summer flings before, casual and easy, with women who wanted nothing more than a few weeks of fun. But Claire wasn't like them. She wasn't a woman looking for an escape. She was a woman who had spent her whole life running, and for the first time, she had nowhere left to go. Noah saw it in the way she looked at him. The way she let herself sink into the quiet of the town, like she was trying to memorize every piece of it. He wanted to ask her to stay. He almost did, so many times. But every time the words were on his tongue, he swallowed them back. Because if she stayed, it had to be because she wanted to, not because he asked her to. Still, the thought of waking up and knowing she'd be gone made his chest feel tight. He wasn't sure if he was ready for that kind of goodbye. The town was quiet that evening, the air thick with a scent of salt and warm sand. Claire sat on the porch of her cottage, staring out at the water. Noah found her there, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Hey," he said, voice softer than usual. She looked up, offering him a small smile. "Hey." He hesitated, then sat down beside her. "You're leaving tomorrow." It wasn't a question. Claire swallowed.
Yeah.
A beat of silence passed. Then Noah exhaled and looked at her, his gaze steady, searching. You don't have to. Her heart clenched. She had been waiting for him to say it, and now that he had, she didn't know what to do. Noah. She looked away, staring at the horizon. My life is in New York. Is it? He asked, tilting his head slightly. Because you don't seem so sure. She closed her eyes. He wasn't wrong. Every day in Blue Haven had felt like a glimpse into a life she didn't know she could have. A life where mornings were slow, where happiness wasn't measured by promotions, where love didn't have to be something logical. She could stay. She could choose this. But the thought terrified her. I don't know how to change everything, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Noah reached over, brushing his knuckles along the back of her hand. You don't have to change everything, he said. Just decide what makes you happy. Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him that he made her happy. That this place, this life, he made her happier than she had been in years. But was that enough? Could love be enough? The morning was quiet. Too quiet. Claire packed her bags in silence, her heart pounding with every piece of clothing she folded. Noah hadn't come by. She wasn't sure if she wanted him to. Maybe it would be easier this way. If she left without another moment of weakness, without another chance for him to ask her to stay. But when she walked outside, luggage in hand, he was there, standing by his truck, arms crossed, eyes unreadable.
She stopped.
Noah. He shook his head, a small, almost sad smile tugging at his lips. Don't say anything you don't mean, Claire. Her breath caught, because she wanted to say something. She wanted to tell him that this wasn't just a summer thing, that he had changed something in her, that she didn't want to go. But she was afraid. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She stepped forward, pressed a lingering kiss to his lips, and whispered, Goodbye, Noah. Then she turned and walked away. Claire sat at the airport, staring at her boarding pass. Her flight was called. People began boarding. She should stand up. She should go. But she didn't. Instead, she sat frozen, heart pounding, mind spinning. Because for the first time in her life, she wasn't thinking about what she should do. She was thinking about what she wanted to do. And suddenly, the answer was crystal clear. Noah was at the docks when he saw her. He had spent the entire morning telling himself he would be fine, that he had known from the beginning she would leave. But then he turned and there she was, standing at the edge of the pier, wind in her hair, a nervous smile on her lips. Hey, she said, voice almost lost in the breeze. He didn't say anything at first, just took her in, like he was making sure she was really there. Then slowly he walked toward her. Hey. She bit her lip, then took a deep breath. I couldn't do it, she admitted. I couldn't get on that plane. His throat tightened. Why? Claire took a step closer. Because you make me happy. And I think I want to see where this goes. Noah's lips parted slightly, surprise flickering in his eyes. But then, warmth spread across his face, slow and steady, like the tide rolling in. You sure about that? He murmured. She nodded.
Yeah.
I am. A beat of silence. Then Noah exhaled a laugh, shaking his head before pulling her into his arms. Good, he said, voice rough with emotion. Because I wasn't sure how I was supposed to let you go. Claire pressed her face into his shoulder, breathing him in, letting the waves crash behind them. Maybe love wasn't always about logic. Maybe, sometimes, it was about taking a chance. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. Claire had never felt more certain about anything in her life. Standing in Noah's arms, hearing the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, she knew she had made the right decision. She had chosen love over fear, happiness over uncertainty. She had chosen him. But fate had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. The first sign that something was off came that afternoon. Claire and Noah were sitting at the town's only beachfront cafe, sharing a plate of fried calamari, when a sleek black car rolled down the narrow streets of Blue Haven. It was out of place, Too polished, too expensive for a town where most people drove beat-up trucks or salt-rusted sedans. The car slowed in front of the cafe, and a man stepped out. A man Claire hadn't seen in months. Her stomach clenched.
Ethan.
Noah must have sensed her shift in mood because he followed her gaze, his brows pulling together as he studied the newcomer. "You know him?" Claire swallowed.
Yeah.
Ethan caught sight of her then, his expression unreadable. But the way he strode toward them, purposeful and confident, told her he wasn't here for a casual visit. "Claire," he greeted, stopping just beside their table. His sharp blue eyes flickered between her and Noah. "I was hoping I'd find you here." Noah leaned back in his chair, arms crossing over his chest. "And you are?" Ethan didn't acknowledge him. His focus remained locked on Claire. "We need to talk. Alone." Noah bristled beside her, but Claire barely noticed, because she knew exactly why Ethan was here. And suddenly, the choice she thought she had made so clearly no longer seemed so simple. She agreed to talk to Ethan, if only to get it over with. They walked along the beach, the waves lapping at their feet, but Claire's mind was racing. "You didn't have to come here," she said, breaking the silence. Ethan scoffed. "Didn't I?" "You disappeared, Claire. 1 minute, you're on track for everything you've worked for, promotions, connections, the life you planned, and the next, you vanish into a no-name town with a fisherman." Claire flinched. "That's not. You're walking away from everything. And for what?" Ethan interrupted, his voice sharp with frustration. "A summer fling?" Claire clenched her fists. "Noah isn't just a fling." Ethan exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're smarter than this, Claire." He turned to face her fully. "You have a future waiting for you in New York. A real future. This place? It's a fantasy. And it's going to fall apart the moment reality catches up with you." His words hit harder than she wanted to admit. Because hadn't she been telling herself the same thing just days ago? That Blue Haven wasn't real. That love wasn't enough. But then she thought of Noah, of how she felt with him. "This is my choice," she said, voice steadier than she felt. Ethan studied her, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled something out of his pocket and handed it to her. A letter. Claire hesitated before taking it. The moment she saw the letterhead, her stomach dropped. It was from her company, her old boss. Her eyes flickered to Ethan in confusion. "What is this?"
He sighed.
"A second chance." Her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the letter and read the words inside. A job offer. Not just any job, the job. The promotion she had fought for, dreamed of for years. It was everything she had wanted before Blue Haven. Before Noah. She looked up at Ethan, her throat dry. "You don't have to throw away your future," he said. "Come back to New York. Come back to the life you built." Claire felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. Because suddenly, the choice she thought she had already made wasn't a choice at all. Claire didn't tell Noah about the letter. Not yet. She knew she needed to. She owed him honesty. But how could she explain it when she didn't even understand how she felt? That night, as she lay in Noah's arms, staring at the ceiling, her mind raced with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Was love enough? Could she really build a life here? Or was Ethan right? Was she just chasing a fantasy? Noah stirred beside her, his fingers trailing absent-mindedly along her arm. "You're quiet tonight," he murmured. She swallowed hard. "Just tired." He studied her for a moment, but he didn't push. Instead, he pressed a soft kiss to her shoulder, holding her close. And Claire wished, more than anything, that this could be simple. But come morning, she would have to make a choice. A real one. Stay in Blue Haven with Noah, or go back to New York and take the job of a lifetime. The next morning, she sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the letter in her hands. Noah walked in, towel slung over his shoulder, hair damp from his morning swim. "What's that?" Claire inhaled sharply. She had to tell him. Slowly, she turned and held out the letter. Noah took it, his expression unreadable as he scanned the words. When he looked up, there was something in his eyes she had never seen before. Something like fear. "You're leaving," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Claire's heart clenched. I don't know. Noah exhaled, running a hand through his hair. But you're thinking about it. Silence stretched between them. And in that moment, Claire realized this wasn't just about choosing a place to live. It was about choosing a life. Choosing who she wanted to be. And no matter what she chose, she couldn't have both. She had to decide. And fast. Because Noah wasn't the kind of man who would beg her to stay. And if she left, she wasn't sure he'd ever let her come back. Claire could barely hear the waves outside over the sound of her own heartbeat. Noah stood there, the letter in his hands, his jaw clenched tight. You're thinking about leaving, he repeated, his voice calm, too calm. The kind of calm that meant a storm was brewing, just beneath the surface. Claire opened her mouth, then shut it. She didn't know what to say. Because yes, she was thinking about it. She was thinking about everything. Her career, her future, and Noah. Noah, who had come to mean more to her in a few weeks than an entire lifetime in New York. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, she finally admitted. But Noah held up a hand. Stop. Her breath caught. You don't need to explain, Claire, he said, stepping back, the letter crumpling slightly in his grip. I get it.
Noah.
You never planned on staying. His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it now. This was just a summer thing, right? Claire winced. No, it's not like that. Then what is it like? She had no answer. Because how could she tell him she didn't want to leave him, but she also didn't know how to stay? How could she choose between two lives when her heart was being pulled in both directions? Noah ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. You know what, Claire? Maybe Ethan was right. Her stomach twisted. What? Maybe this was never real for you. His words were clipped, but she could see the hurt in his eyes. Maybe I was just part of your vacation. She felt like he had punched the air out of her lungs. That's not fair. He shook his head, letting out a bitter laugh. You're right. It's not. He turned away, shoulders stiff. Claire took a step forward.
Noah.
He didn't look back. Do what you have to do, Claire, he said. And then he walked out the door. Claire sat frozen for what felt like hours. The letter sat beside her, staring up like a silent accusation. This was what she had wanted, right? The chance to take back the life she had worked so hard for? Then why did it feel like she had just lost something even more important? With a deep breath, she grabbed her phone. Ethan answered on the second ring. Claire, he said smoothly. Have you made your decision? She closed her eyes. I need more time. There was a pause. Time for what? To think. Ethan sighed. Claire, you know what's best for you. The life you've built, it's still there, waiting for you. You just have to come back.
Did she? Did she really?
She wasn't sure anymore. Give me until tomorrow, she said. Ethan hesitated, but then, fine. Tomorrow. The call ended, and Claire knew this wasn't just about time. It was about making a choice she couldn't undo. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind kept replaying Noah's words, his expression, the way he had walked away like he was already letting her go. Before she knew it, she was slipping out of bed, grabbing her jacket, and heading for the docks. She had to see him, had to explain. The town was quiet, the ocean whispering in the distance. Noah's boat was there, tied up as always. But the lights inside his cabin were off. Claire hesitated. Then she heard voices.
Low.
Muffled. And one of them was Noah's. She took a step closer. I told you I'd take care of it. Noah's voice was sharp. She doesn't need to know. Claire froze.
Who was he talking to?
You're playing a dangerous game. Another voice, this one unfamiliar, responded. She's gonna find out eventually. Not if we do this right, Noah snapped. Just stick to the plan. Claire's pulse pounded.
Plan?
What plan? A cold sensation spread through her chest. Noah had secrets. And suddenly, she wasn't sure if she had ever known him at all. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Noah's voice, low and tense, echoed in her mind. She doesn't need to know. Know what? She pressed herself against the wooden frame of the dock storage shed, straining to hear more. The other man scoffed. You're getting in too deep. Noah's reply was sharp. I can handle it. The voices lowered, and Claire could only catch broken fragments of their conversation. Moving it tomorrow. Before anyone notices. Last time wasn't clean. She's asking questions. Her stomach twisted. Were they talking about her? Then footsteps. Claire's heart lurched. She had to move.
Now.
She turned, slipping back into the shadows. The docks weren't well lit, but the moon reflected off the water, and she could barely make out their shapes. Noah stepped out of the boat, his figure tall and rigid in the dim light. He turned toward the other man, who lingered by the dock, lighting a cigarette. Be ready, the stranger muttered before walking off into the night. Claire barely dared to breathe. She waited until Noah disappeared down the pier before she slipped away, her mind racing with questions she didn't want to ask. By the time she got back to her cottage, Claire felt like the world had tilted sideways. Noah had secrets. Secrets big enough that he was hiding them from her. What if Ethan had been right? What if this wasn't real? What if Noah had been playing her this whole time? She paced the small living room, her thoughts tangled in knots. Hadn't she told herself this was temporary? That this was just a summer romance? Then why did it feel like she was breaking apart inside? The knock at the door nearly made her jump. Claire hesitated. Then she took a deep breath and opened it. Noah stood there. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, deep, stormy, searching, held something that made her heart clench. Can we talk? He asked. Claire wanted to say no, wanted to shut the door and keep the chaos outside. But instead, she stepped aside and let him in. Noah didn't sit. He stood near the window, arms crossed, gaze flicking to her as she leaned against the counter. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, you're leaving, Noah said. Claire exhaled. I don't know yet. A muscle ticked in his jaw. But you're thinking about it. You said that already. Because it matters. His voice was rough, but underneath it, there was something raw. Claire, I need to know if you're really going to walk away. She opened her mouth and closed it. Because she didn't know. And worse, she wasn't sure if she was staying for the right reasons. Her fingers curled against the countertop. Are you hiding something from me, Noah? The question hung heavy in the air. His expression didn't change. But there was the slightest hesitation before he answered. You really think that? I heard you, she said quietly. On the dock.
Talking to someone.
About something I don't need to know. Noah's gaze darkened. Claire's chest tightened. What are you keeping from me? He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Silence. Something flickered in his expression, something like regret. And in that moment, Claire realized, whatever it was, he wasn't going to tell her. That hurt more than she expected. She swallowed hard. I trusted you. You still can. His voice was softer now, almost pleading. Claire, this has nothing to do with us. Doesn't it? She shook her head. How can I believe that when you won't tell me the truth? He took a step closer. Because I'm asking you to.
Claire wanted to. God, she wanted to.
But something about this, about him, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting for the ground to disappear. I need time, she whispered. Noah's jaw clenched. And in his eyes, she saw the truth. Time wasn't something they had. Not anymore. Noah left without another word. And Claire stood in the quiet, her heart pounding. She had until morning to decide. New York or Blue Haven. Her career, or the man she wasn't sure she could trust. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't have all the answers yet. Maybe she needed to find out exactly what Noah was hiding before she made a choice she couldn't take back. And that meant one thing. She wasn't leaving.
Not yet.
Because if Noah had secrets, it was time to uncover them. Claire didn't sleep. The weight of her decision, of everything she'd learned, pressed down on her like a storm waiting to break. She could leave in the morning, go back to New York, back to the life she had built, the one that made sense. Or she could stay and risk everything for a man she might not even know. Her fingers hovered over her phone. Ethan's number was there. One call, and she'd be gone. But instead, she grabbed her jacket and slipped into the night. If she was going to leave, she needed to know the truth first. The docks were eerily quiet when she arrived. Moonlight shimmered on the water, casting long shadows across the wooden planks. Noah's boat was still there. But he wasn't. Claire exhaled, then turned toward the storage shed. That's where she had heard them last night, where the truth was waiting. Her hands trembled as she pushed the door open. Inside, the scent of salt and wood filled the air. A single lamp flickered in the corner, casting a dim glow over the room. And then she saw it. A locked metal chest. Claire stepped closer, her heart racing. Whatever Noah was hiding, it had to be inside. She hesitated only a moment before grabbing a nearby wrench and striking the lock. Once.
Twice.
On the third hit, the lock broke. Claire yanked the chest open and froze. Stacks of cash. Thick bundles wrapped in rubber bands. But it wasn't just money. Documents. Names. Locations. And a gun. Her blood ran cold. What the hell had she just found? You shouldn't be here. The voice behind her sent a chill down her spine. Claire turned slowly. Noah stood in the doorway, his face unreadable, shadows flickering over his sharp features. But his eyes, those deep, stormy eyes, weren't filled with anger. They were filled with something else. Resignation. Like he had known this moment was coming. Claire swallowed hard. What is this? Noah sighed, stepping inside. It's complicated. She let out a shaky laugh. Yeah, I got that part. He ran a hand through his hair, glancing at the open chest. You weren't supposed to find out. Claire folded her arms. Well, I did. Silence. Then, I smuggle people out of bad situations, Noah admitted quietly. People who can't go through legal channels. Some are running from dangerous pasts. Some are escaping worse. Claire's breath caught. You're helping them? Noah nodded. Not every system is fair. Not every law protects the right people. So, I do what I can.
Claire looked at the money.
The documents. The gun. Then why the secrecy? She asked. Noah exhaled. Because not everyone sees it that way. If the wrong people found out, if they knew who I was helping, people could get hurt. Claire's chest tightened. He wasn't a criminal. He was saving lives. And now she understood why he hadn't told her. Why didn't you trust me? She whispered. Noah's jaw clenched. Because I knew you'd leave. Claire's heart ached at the quiet certainty in his voice. And maybe a few days ago, he would have been right.
But now
she wasn't so sure. Morning came too soon. Claire stood by her packed suitcase, staring at her phone. Ethan was waiting for an answer. New York or Blue Haven. Her past or her future. She turned as the door creaked open. Noah stood there, looking like he hadn't slept either. His voice was quiet. Are you going? Claire studied him, the man who had changed everything in just a few short weeks. The man she wasn't ready to walk away from. No, she said softly. Relief flickered in his eyes, but he didn't move. You sure? He asked. Claire smiled, stepping closer. For the first time in a long time, yeah. Noah let out a breath, a slow smile tugging at his lips. And when he pulled her into his arms, she knew she had made the right choice. Because some things, some people, were worth taking a chance on.